Welcome back to Razmafzar TV. Today I'm having Alex Shearer. Alex is a member of Razmafzar UK. Welcome to our channel, Alex. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Thank you very much. So, Alex, first, before we start, let us know a bit about yourself. Who is Alex?
Well, I'm a student, study at SOAS, and I do international relations. Although as a sub-module, I've taken Persian because I'm very interested in Iran in my free time. I read the Shahnameh when I was 15, and I fell in love with the culture after that, basically.
Okay. What did you find interesting about Shahnameh, Alex?
Well, it's like obviously the Odyssey and the Iliad, except a lot longer, of course.
Of course.
And it's the fact that the Shahnameh and these ancient myths and legends are still well known in Iranian culture today, and it's still celebrated, and it's still very much an active part of the culture. It's probably one of the oldest continuous, so to speak, cultures in the world. You know, before I was very much into Iran, I was very into the Greeks. But the Greeks don't have that. You know, a modern Greek doesn't know all of the ancient legends. That's just, they've changed a lot since then. But a modern Iranian, they still know it, and the
Everyone.
poetry is still
Yeah.
like a major part. You know, everyone knows who Rostam is, everyone knows Feridun, and it's so impressive to me that they're so
Everyone.
educated, so to speak, like literally.
Everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, we grew up with Shahnameh, and Shahnameh is the most important Persian book, the
Exactly.
most. And
Yeah.
coming from a cultured society or language, which Persian is, which has, so many books have been written in Persian. The most important is Shahnameh, and everyone knows about it. Everyone.
Exactly. It's like the spirit of Iran contained into
Yes.
one book. It's very impressive.
To make a comparison, because as you know, I studied years in the United States. When you
Yeah.
go to the United States, and then I had a friend who went to the United States to study, but then I went there as a young student, but he went later. And so he called me and he said, "This is really strange in the United States." I said, "Why? Do you know who their heroes are?" I said, "Of course, I'm a country analyst for the US. I know." I said, "Who are they?" And I said, "Batman, Superman." And then he started to laugh. He said, "You are right." I said, "Yeah, of course. That's why they make so many movies." When people laugh about it, Batman,
Yeah.
Superman, Aquaman, they are really American heroes. And these are, fostered in the movie industry and in comic books. And, and in Iran, this is Shahnameh.
Exactly. I've never thought about the superheroes being American heroes before. It fits very well, doesn't it?
And they are. They
Yeah.
are. I mean, there is no coincidence. And I say this as a guy who helps European companies to establish in the US and about the US culture. And we should never, ever forget there is a reason they're fostered and promoted in Hollywood and American movie industry. Batman stands for one aspect of American culture, Superman another thing, and so on and so on. It's not coincidence. The same as Rostam stands for something, Afrosiyab, or who was his enemy, or Sohrab, his son, stands for something else.
Yeah.
Esfandiar stands for something. Give stands for something else.
Yeah.
Gashas stands. Siyavush stands for something else. These are all heroes, and each one of them represents something. And one thing which Shahnameh is very interesting, Alex, I'm sure you know, heroes are human. They have good
Yes,
aspects and bad aspects.
of course. And it's amazing how well written it is and how sort of nuanced it is, despite having been written so long ago. I read it thinking, from a very young age, I've been a fan of Lord of the Rings, and I read it thinking, wow, this is, it's sort of, well, the same level, if not better, to me, because it's just so well written, and if anything, it's more nuanced. It has more sort of grayness in the characters, and whatnot, which is very, very interesting. Like, a moment that stood for me was after his shop. Obviously, he's portrayed as this villain the whole time. He murdered his brother. He invades Iran countless times. But at the end, when he starts losing to Khosrow and his children die, and then he's alone by that cave where he's eventually found and killed, you actually feel sorry for him. The way it's written, you feel bad for him. And he's like, well, this guy, he wasn't that bad, and it's that sort of nuance of the villain is very much human, and you can relate to them even
Yeah.
after they've done all these terrible things. It's very, very well written and very good. It's amazing. I
You
think it's
see, you
probably,
identify the villain has human aspects. Even Dave have human aspects. The
yeah,
demons have human aspects, and you feel sorry for them. And then people you identify with, all of a sudden they have bad traits as well. Like
exactly.
Rostam. Look
Yeah,
how he killed his son. Actually, as you know, he really was not honest man because he lost to him. And each time said in Iranian tradition, you need to give another chance. And once he just could put him down, he
yeah,
immediately stabbed him. Which
exactly. And he did the same to Esfandia as well with the,
yes,
yes,
the same to Esfandiar.
yeah. It's
Exactly.
very they're so well written characters, and I don't think, out of all the sort of myths and legends that I've read and seen before, I think the Shahnameh and Iranian mythology in general is probably the best written of all of it. And it's so underrated in the West. It's such a shame. And I just fell in love with that. And then I began researching ancient Iran, so, the Achaemenids, the Sasanians, and then I eventually worked my way forward towards, well, modern Iran, but also the Safavids, and particularly my favorite era is 18th century Iran with Nader Shah and Karim Khan Zand, and all of these very colorful characters, so to speak.
It's
And
wonderful.
yeah,
Excuse me.
it is amazing.
You have been training, and I have been actually, teaching you Shamshir and Separ for
Yeah,
some time. And to be honest, you never told me about your huge interest in Iran. That's why I invited you to this channel.
yeah.
I'm really amazed how much you know about Iran.
Thank
That's
you.
wonderful.
Mm.
And tell me why Nader Shah?
Well, I found out about Nadir. I asked, I have a few online Iranian friends, and I asked one of them who his favorite kings were. And one of them was Nadir. And I ended up researching him because of this, because I hadn't really heard of him before. And I read Michael Axworthy's book about him, which is like the most up to date book. And the story of his life, it's like a tragedy. He had so many potentials. He came from nothing. He's called the Napoleon of Iran, but I
Yes, he
think he's
is.
better than Napoleon, to be honest, because Napoleon, he came from a nobility background and he went to a military school. Nader was the son of a shepherd, and he collected sticks when he was young, but then obviously the country falls apart, but he becomes a bit of a local warlord. He sides with the Prince Tamask, and he ends up basically making him a puppet. He beats the Afghans out. He modernizes the army, modernizes the country, beats the Ottomans. He wins everywhere. He won every battle except for Samarra in 1733, which is a shame because then he would have taken Baghdad and possibly gone further. But he takes everything. And for a moment there, after a sack of Delhi, after the Battle of Karnal, there's a moment where you think, wow, Iran's, back on the map as this great power. The Safavids been in decline for a while, but Nader's brought it back. And despite the Ottomans and the Mughals being far richer, far more powerful on paper, Nader beat both of them multiple times. And you think, wow, in this, Axworthy speaks about it, Iran was on the precipice of a military revolution, which is what led to Europe. Europe had a military revolution in the 17th century, and that's what led to them industrializing and modernizing. And Nader, he did all the same things. He went through all the same routines, and he could have done the same, but then he went mad, and in his insanity, he destroyed everything he'd built. He blinded his son, which meant that his dynasty fell apart. He oppressed the people, so there were rebellions everywhere, and his empire shattered, and he was assassinated. But so in that one moment, you see such a vision of the future that could have been, and then it's like an almost Shakespearean, or I suppose a Ferdowsian tragedy. In because obviously the blind of his son is very similar to Rostam and Sorab, and it all falls apart. And that rise and fall, it's so interesting to me, and the fact that there are barely any sort of sources on the era. There are a few books, but compared to people like Napoleon or Frederick the Great, it's barely anything. Is such a shame, because it's so interesting how this guy, he rose from nothing, became everything, and then lost it all again. It's amazing to me. I think it's probably he's my favorite character in history by far. I think because of the potentials that he had and the tragedy that his life was in the end.
I don't know if I'm sure you realize it on our channel. With Beat, we discussed the miniatures or the paintings from
Yes.
Tarikh Jahangirshahi Naderi.
Yes, I love those paintings. My phone background is one of them, actually.
Oh,
I do
really?
yeah.
That's interesting. You know that those paintings are the most realistic paintings and miniatures of any battlefield. They
Really?
depict, yeah,
I
the
did not
most
know that.
realistic. Yeah. They
Yeah.
exactly depict. It is as if they took a picture. Because many miniatures, they're also very nice. They're very exact and detailed. But that, many Iranian experts say, and I can tell you as a weapon analyst, that I had his swords of Nader in my hands. My book, Arms and Armor from Iran, that
Yeah,
book, huge book.
I do. Yeah.
All of them were in my hands. I measured them. They're king swords from Achaemenid period to
Yeah.
the end of the Qajar period. All kings of Iran, all of them, all
Wow.
arms and armor were in my hands. I didn't go and took pictures. You are not allowed to take pictures of them anyhow, those military
Yeah.
museums. I had them in my hand. That's why in my book you see the measurements.
Yeah.
I measured them. All sorts of Safavid kings, Nader, Zand period, Qajar period, Sasanian swords, Baghdad Parthian swords, Achaemenid swords, they were all in my hand. And Nader, in Musée Naderi, which was in Mashhad, they were all in my hands, and measured them in my hands with my hand, and I wrote books about them. You know that I have written 10 books and 204 articles, yes? And all those weapons you see, they were in my hands. All I think one of his shamshirs, which is in Musée Naderi, I had 3 of his shamshirs. One of them is the most or the heaviest shamshir I have ever handled, 1,250 grams.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Yes.
that is heavy. What is there a reason for it being so heavy, or?
I mean, Persian shamshirs vary for adults between 650 to that sword, 1,250 grams. His swords were huge, and he has also his. Do you know what his favorite weapon was for warfare?
It was the axe, wasn't it?
Which one?
The axe.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you go in front of his mausoleum, you see there is a statue made of him with an axe, always raising an axe and fighting with an axe. Yes.
Are his axes preserved at all, or not?
It's on my book as well.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yes. So, like Nader, what are you interested about the Zand period?
Well, obviously, after Nader dies, you have that civil war, and the civil wars that happened post Nader are even less well documented than Nader himself. Like, I think the only sources I've been able to access for it is the Cambridge History of Iran and Volume 7, and a few like random articles dotted around. I don't know the names off the top of my head, but there are a few articles that I found on it. And then I found a book in Persian called The 4,000 Year History of the Armies of Iran, but I haven't started translating that part yet, but I will be doing that soon.
Which book is it?
4,000 Year History of Iran's Armies is
in Persian?
Yes, in Persian.
Which means that you speak Persian.
I'm learning it, yeah.
Okay.
In university. I don't want to say I'm very good at it, but I am learning.
Okay.
um, and so it's very badly documented, unfortunately. But what actually happened, how this, the strongest army in the world, most likely, just disintegrated, and then you have all of these little tribal warlords fighting one another. You have the governors that were still in place also trying to scrounge for power. You have obviously Nadia's nephews fighting one another, which is what started the proper collapse, and then his poor grandson Shahrukh sitting in Mashhad, while you had Ismail III, the Safavi pretender, in Isfahan, and how they basically just kept the warlords kept passing around the uh, dynastic claimant as basically a bargaining chip, because whoever owned him, because he didn't have the power, it was the warlord really who had the power, the Vakil, as Karim styled himself later, but Ali Bakhtiari did it as well. And basically, the back and forth of it is so interesting. I love military history in general, like the strategies, the commanders, that scale of military history, and the campaigns that happened between these different generals. They're very underrated, but very interesting. At one point, Karim Khan was besieging Astarabad, and the Khajars were about to lose, but then he screwed up, and like a year later, the Khajars were besieging Shiraz, and Karim was about to lose, but then he brought it back, and it was just back and forth like constantly. I think Karim was besieged in Shiraz like twice by Azad Afghan and the Khajars at different points, and he was besieging them a few times at their strongholds as well. And it's so interesting, this basically this free for all between these different rulers. And there are a few different funny stories as well, I find, like in Yazd at the time. It was governed by the governor of Kerman, but they had a popular revolt against Kerman because they didn't like the taxes. And basically, some peasant boy, well, teenager, snuck in with a few musketeers and took over the city and basically set up as the ruler of the city. And he beat off Karim's forces, I think, 3 times before he was finally betrayed by his own soldiers and executed. And it's so interesting how, there was some, basically, anyone who could gather up a band of men could basically conquer a city if they were good enough. It's very interesting. I love like eras of warlordism and whatnot. It's very, very interesting.
I can
And then when
also, yeah, go ahead. I can
and
give
then when
you two, also an anecdote of Karim Khan Zand.
yeah,
He has two shamshirs, and I also, of course, had them in my hands.
yeah,
Okay, I can tell you one thing. Up to date, Military Museum of Tehran, which is all of Persian items in my book,
yeah,
Military Museum of Bandar Anzali, also in my book in the north, Military Museum of Shiraz, also in my book. That's why they gave me book prize of Iran twice. For this
yeah.
book, I got the book prize, but for Lexicon, I got the second book prize. I am the first researcher who got permission to have and analyze them because they belong to the military personally. The first
Oh, wow.
in the no professor in Iran, even in Iran, forget outside, had the permission to have all of them in their hand, measure them, and do it. Now, one thing, Karim Khanizan has two shamshir. One of them, the heavier one, which is also in my book Arms and Armor from Iran,
Yeah,
is in Military Museum of Tehran in Sadabad complex. Another one is not a military museum, is in Pars Museum in Shiraz, too. And both of them have this inscription in Persian about Karim Khan Zand, which write in Shearer
yeah,
Falak, they write about him, right? Anyway. Shamshir Vakil on Shah Keshvargir است. Yes, that's what, because he called himself Vakil, representative. He
yeah,
didn't call himself king. So I don't know if you know that. So this was this after Agha Muhammad Khan Qajar. He just
yeah.
defeated them. He hated Karim Khan Zand that much that he had his remains brought to
Reburied
Golestan
beneath his
Palace. You know that.
palace. Yeah,
Okay. And I wrote also in my book, you can see that, but also I wrote an article in it about that. I think in
mm,
French I wrote that article. I don't remember, or in English, I don't know. But you see that picture of Reza Khan when he came into power. When he
yeah,
came into power, the family of Karim Khan Zand, descendants, went to him, asked him to give them the permission to remove the remains, bring them back again to Shiraz.
yeah,
and he allowed them. And there are pictures of that time. And
Really?
they gave him the sword, one of the swords of Karim Khanizan, because one
And
of
that's
them
what
was already
Shiraz.
in the military museum. Yes, and
Yeah.
that sword, which is also in my book, actually on the cover, is on the cover of Arms and Armor from Iran.
Yeah.
That sword is now in Pars Museum, where the remains of Karim Khanizand are there. And this sword, because uh, Reza Khan didn't take that sword for himself, he gave it again to the city, and is on top of this in the mausoleum behind
Wow.
this protective glass.
Yeah.
So I can tell you just one thing because it's extremely important. People tell me you work round the clock. I said, yeah, I do. I keep writing. The priceless moments, the priceless moments when you have documented swords, arms and armor in your hands. Do you know what kind of energy level it is? They were in my hands.
I can imagine. It must feel amazing.
Yes. So any king, all Safavid kings, all of them, the swords were in my hand, all of them. It's
Wow.
Karim Khan is, and then Karim Khan is, and something else might be very interesting. You know that because he considered himself because of all these things behind that. So this is the sword of him, which is there. Also from Qajar, many kings of Qajar are there.
Mm.
Interesting,
Yeah,
interesting.
it is. That you must be one of the only people other than the Shahs who have held all of the swords. That
Yes, I'm one of the
that
few
is very
people.
impressive. Did
Yes,
Reza Khan and Muhammad Reza Shah have their own swords made?
yes.
Or really? I didn't know that at all.
Yes, yes. Reza Khan has a shushke, as we call it in Persian, shushke, shashka, as they say it
Yeah.
in Persian. It's a Persian shashka, which like it looks like those Russian or Caucasian, but his shushke is in. I also analyzed it, measured it as well, but I didn't publish it because I always write about until the end of the Qajar period, not after
Yeah.
that. But I
Okay.
had his sword in my hand. Also, there is one of the sabers, which is a military saber sword, excuse me, of Muhammad Reza Shah. I also had it in my hand and measured that. Yeah, but
Yeah.
again, I don't publish about not Pahlavi, but up to end of Qajar period. That's where
Yeah.
I do.
That makes sense. And did Ahmad Shah Qajar have his own
Yeah, of
shamshir?
course. You see that his sword as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I always assumed that they would just reuse the same sword because that's what they do in the West.
Uh,
But
no, the thing is, if you go again, this you see it in my book. There are 6 swords of Fatali Shah Qajar,
hmm,
which are in the military museums of Iran. His own
yeah.
swords. 4 of them are Safavid blades.
Okay. So they reuse the blades. Did they change
Yes,
the
4
hilt
of
at
them.
all?
4 of them. They could still make it during Fatali Shah Qajar period, very good shamshirs, but heirloom swords from Safavid period where you can see that it has Bande Shah Velayat Abbas, Amal Asadullah Isfani. I mean, Asadullah Isfani, as I write in my books, was not one person. There were, always the quality mark of
Hmm.
different smiths. But then you see Abu al Saif Fatali Shah Qajar. You see that another cartouche is added. So he always adds his own cartouche below the original cartouche of the Safavid period.
Yeah. Very interesting. So they'd
Yeah.
reuse the blade because the steel quality.
Yes.
Did they
Yes.
change the hilt at all?
Yeah. No, they changed the hilt, of course, as is usual. But he also had the Qajar period. The Qajar period, they made also excellent swords still.
Yeah.
Excellent sword. But many swords and shamshirs you see in the market, they are from Safavid period. Many of them. Because in Europe, in the West, everything they see, they always say Qajar period, which is not true. Many of them go back to the Safavid period.
Yeah. That's very interesting. What's the oldest sword in good condition that you've seen and
Oh,
handled?
bronze period, copper period.
Really? In good condition?
Yeah, of course. Bronze. Again, you see in my book as well, I had all those excavated swords from Marlik by Dr. Izzat Negahban.
Yeah.
Bronze remains very well. Bronze is iron rusts a lot, of course,
Yeah.
but bronze keeps its shape in very good condition. Very good. It has just the rust on it, this green rust, and below is the reddish rust, but it keeps its integrity.
Yeah. What about the oldest in like a usable condition then?
Bronze swords can be used; they're in usable condition.
Oh, really? I didn't
Of
know that.
course, yeah, of course.
Okay.
You can use
Well,
bronze swords. I mean, you shouldn't because they're antiques, but
well,
they're
yes. Uh,
bronze you can
well,
use.
what's the
Yes.
oldest shamshir that you've had then?
I mean, the shamshir, as you know, in Persian, as I have written about it all the time, shamshir doesn't mean it's curved.
Yes,
Shamshir
it's
in
just
Persian is everything. It means sword.
yeah,
Even in Sassanid period, they call it shamshir, not
yeah.
shamshir, shamshir, or shafshir.
What would you call a curved sword in Persian then?
Shamshir. It is all these things again are in my lexicon, right? Lexicon of arms. I have over 5,000 words, arms, and armor there. This
Okay,
is in lexicon. It's called shamshir kham.
okay.
Shamshir
So
kham.
what's the oldest shamshir kham you've had?
Okay, then again, depends. Highly curved or less curved.
Both. Tell me either.
There are highly curved swords, definitely from Shah Abbas and Shah Ismail. Highly
Okay,
curved, they are there. But there are also attributed swords to Timur, but they are not made possibly, most probably, they have this Amir Khan Timur Gurkhani, but they are most attributed swords to him. They are not made during his period.
okay,
But we can, with authority in Iranian museums, you can say Shah Ismail and also Shah Abbas, definitely. Their personal swords are in Iranian museums. Yes,
very nice, very nice.
yes, highly carved swords. Yes, and in very good condition, usable condition. But this is
Mm.
crucible steel. You can even cut. I had it in my hand, and you can remove your nail with them. That
Oh
kind
wow,
of edge they have.
yeah,
Crucible steel. Crucible
that is
steel remains. You can really, and you can. I mean, we shouldn't do that because we have always protective glove, but we put always I put oil on them, Japanese protective oil,
great.
shoji oil, but you can shave yourself. That sharp they are.
Oh wow,
Yeah, yeah,
and
that sharp. This is crucible steel.
mm,
Many people, I have to say that, many people have never handled real crucible steel. They always say, oh, the difference between legend and reality, all these things they talk about. But I don't know if you know that on our channel, because there was a big discussion if crucible steel can cut that well, if they're brittle. Now, I don't know if you know, I have translated more than 10 manuscripts on
mm,
crucible steel making. Because before I
yes,
published them, there were one in Arabic a bit, one in this and that, one in Persian by Abu Rayhan Biruni, but I translated 10. In one of them, it says if you bring crucible steel to the cold area, it becomes brittle. The reason is clear. Turks wanted to have Ottoman Turks Persian blades. Arabs wanted to have Persian blades. Mughal Indians wanted to have Persian blades. Caucasians wanted to have Russians, even to
mm,
French. Everyone wanted to have Persian blades because of its beauty and because of its cutting efficiency. As I have
yeah,
published, no sword. It's not because I'm Persian, ethnically Persian. Really not. I'm a researcher. No sword can match the beauty of Persian crucible steel.
yeah,
No one. I mean, and I'll say that. The thing for us is the following, and the following is extremely important. When we come and look at these blades and take a look at them, they say, okay, there is it's brittle. Excuse me, I just lost the thread. This is brittle and breaks. It is like, I'm sure you know that I translated 12 Persian archery manuscripts and
yeah,
published in my Persian archery and swordsmanship, that my book, my red book, right?
yeah,
And the rest of them in different articles together with Bede. I translated them and then we annotated together. Before I published, everyone said Borutkesh is the most important, based on Arab archery and Turkish archery. Borutkesh is also Persian. But then I came in another manuscript, said no, Abrukesh is the most important. And what is this Abrukesh? Abrukesh is people from Isfahan use Abrukesh, eyebrow draw. Another one goes to say, no, Sinekesh is the most important. Another one said Rishkesh, beard draw is important. You see,
yeah,
every archery master has its own opinion. So is the sword. So is with the sword.
yeah. That
So
makes
what I
sense.
did, I talked to a French collector. I went to Normandy, and Normandy, north of France, in deep winter, it is cold. It's really cold, even colder than many areas in Frankfurt or in Germany.
Yeah,
And this is on our channel. I had this Asadullah blade and I had a Kalb Ali blade, Safavid period blades, provided by a very gracious and nice French collector. I cannot mention. I told him I'm going to cut hard grain tatami omote. Hard grain tatami omote is not a walk in a park because when you do cutting, many people just do the soft grain tatami omote. This goes like much easier. Hard grain tatami omote is the resistance of a human body.
Yeah.
From this side to this side. I don't want to go into detail, but you know what I mean. And I had Asadullah, deep winter, below zero, go there, cuts, and the blade doesn't break. Cuts, and the blade doesn't break. Kaaba Ali the same, cuts, and the blade doesn't break. Cut, the blade doesn't break. Because for me, it's important. I'm not only a researcher. I think everyone says, everyone wants me to publish for them. I reached academically one of the highest echelons, and everyone says,
Yeah.
oh, you're number one in this field of Iranian arms and armor, or one of the few. But I'm also a martial artist, experienced martial artist.
And
Not
you know
only
how
a
to
thing.
cut, of course.
So I could prove. It's on our channel. Please check that if you haven't seen them. Then it cuts. Then it cuts. So all these things, because crucible steel, Poulad Gohardar was good because of its beautiful pattern, but because of its cutting efficiency.
Yeah.
The same with Japanese. It really unnerving for me. Many people who have not even handled a Japanese nihonto. Look, I'm not talking about the real Japanese blades. I'm not talking about what we do in private collections or in museums. I'm not talking about some, well, modern-made so-called Japanese, right?
Yeah.
They're vicious cutters, extremely well-made, human perfection. Japanese blades are, and the same goes with the Persian. And both of them share one thing: everything is about the blade. Everything is about the blade. Persian shamshirs handle are also beautiful, fittings are also beautiful, but minimalistic, like Japanese. Everything in Persian and Japanese they share. As I said in my books, I'm not the only one who says that. Share one thing: everything is about the beauty of the blade, activity on the blade, waves of the sea in Persian,
Yeah.
mushabbak, wood grain, leather pattern, and all these things, and the classifications, which I also published in one of my last books about the classifications of them. And talking about Nader Shah, if you're interested, Aid to Sight, the book which was published, it's a sword classification by an Iranian called Mirza Lutfullah, who during Nader immigrated to Mughal India, became
Yeah.
the military advisor, and wrote the book Aid to Sight, Taid Basara. So I have
Yeah.
this book annotated. And when Nader attacked Mughal India and sacked Delhi, he was
Yeah.
on the side with the Indians fighting him.
Hmm.
He was actually watching the city falling from the other side of the river.
Yeah.
And he's the author. So I'm really happy that you like this
Of
Iranian
course. And
history.
and this crucible steel, is it does it measure up to modern steel in like is it as good, is it better, or is
Of
modern
course
steel
it does. In
uh,
contrast to what people say, of
yeah.
course it does.
And uh, is it still made in Iran or is it more of a lost art?
I okay. We had a. I don't know if you know that we have made reproductions of that. Also, I heard some Iranians look to have succeeded that. I wrote an article about with a Finnish smith who replicated it. Also with three German smiths. They're not also with a Russian
Hmm.
smith, but they make these smaller blades and try to imitate the pattern. Some of them by now get very beautiful pattern, very beautiful. But getting the pattern is one thing, but making a crucible steel blade with that curve and with that back, like the
Hmm.
back of a card, with all those intricate things is another thing. If you want to come and ask me, has someone made a real shamshir blade with the same feeling and same pattern as it was in the past? I can give you definitely not.
Hmm. And why was it lost? Why was the technique lost?
There are different reasons, and I also proved that in Iran, they had also made crucibles, not only because in the past they said all these cakes were imported from Sri Lanka and India,
Yeah.
but it's not true. In Iran, we had them as well. Also in today's Uzbekistan, in Greater Iran, also in Nader Shah, because there's also one area of production, Nader Shah in Khorasan destroyed them of kilns
Yeah.
making crucible. Yeah, there are many ideas about that. Some people say you need to understand that crucible steel is called pulad gohardar, right? Jeweled steel.
Yeah.
And you should also know that, for example, in one of my books, I talked about jewels and patterned crucible steel, which is a translation of Goharnameh. There are different Goharnames. And Goharnameh in Persian, always one part is about crucible steel making. I already published one, complete Goharnameh. On Al-Qarashi, I talk about different Goharnameh, about crucible steel making comparative study. And I'm also writing another one. And so there are two things about that. Gohar, they looked at, means jewel, or precious stones, if you want. For them, emerald was the same gohar, precious, as pulad gohardor. Ruby was the same. Gold was the same. Silver was the same. They were
Yeah.
all gohar. Do you understand? So,
I
for
do.
example, to give you an example, when there was internal fights between the Zand factions,
Yeah.
and one of them wanted to attract more generals to come to him, he had beautiful card and khanjars made of crucible steel with beautiful handles, and he said, everyone who comes to meet the general, I give one of them to him. So many generals came to him because they wanted to have that khanjar. This gives you an idea how expensive these items were.
Right. So it declined in production because of how expensive it was. It just wasn't.
One of them was that there is an idea about India, but it's not true about Iran. They said in India the British prohibited production of that. There is an idea. I mean, no one can prove it really. But then another idea is because you need lots of forest, lots of wood. But well, back then they didn't do ESG as we do today. And and then so there are different ideas about them, of course. There are different ideas about and then it's a cheap production by the West, like many Sheffield, many products from Sheffield in India, or many. Then they also said, okay, it's much cheaper, and they love the European blades or whatever they say that. But it's
Yeah.
not all of them don't hold true. But then the production went downhill, and then there was no market for it after a while. So they replaced also in Iran. Qajar period, if you look at many people say, oh, Qajar sword. But many middle and late era Qajar, they were heirloom swords,
Yeah.
right? So all these tourists go there and bought those. They thought this is from Qajar period. But they had this modernization of the army, as I have again written in different books of mine. They
Yeah.
look like European uniform. They had
Of
military
course.
advisors. And so this is like that. Yeah.
It's a shame. And who is your favorite? What is your favorite era in Iranian history, or favorite ruler in Iranian history?
First of all, I don't have a favorite ruler.
Well,
I have favorite, I like weapons. Okay, I tell
fair enough. Well,
I'm interested in the development of weapons. If you show me a weapon, I can tell you from which era it is. I can analyze. I did it for Musée Bonyad, 520,
yeah.
even, and they also tried to check on me. They said you said everything correctly. So I'm a weapon guy. I can also tell you based on miniatures from which era this miniature is based on the weapons they have. I can tell you, I can really identify many things based on that. I'm a weapon guy. And the reason is a weapon guy, I tell you why. Once you can't, not that I don't like, I like Nader Shah a lot. I like Karim Khan Zand a lot. I like Shah Ismail a lot. I like Shah Abbas a lot. I like Anushiravan, many Sasanian kings. I like Cyrus the Great. Don't misunderstand me. But I tell you one thing, I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
Right? Because when I come and someone who loves Sasanians, period, for him said, what, you had all these Sasanian blades in your hand? Of course. Also Achaemenid. Wow, what an honor. Someone who likes Islamic period Iran, oh, you had Shah Ismail sword in your hand. But then the famous question comes up, what is better, a Sasanian sword or Safavid period sword? And to us, it is always like a kid's question. What does it mean? What is better? Do you understand what I mean?
Yes, it varies on what you want to use them for, I assume.
Yes. And
Yeah.
then also technology. You cannot compare the technology of 15th, 16th, 17th century to technology of, you
Yeah.
can't. You simply can't. It's like, like today as well. And for based on that, I'm interested in that. I'm also, but what I'm also interested, I'm also writing a book on military strategy based on historical, anecdotes and facts, because
Mm.
each country has a military culture, and I'm interested in that strategy of the
Yeah.
military.
That is very
That's what
interesting.
I'm interested. I'm very interested in these things, but I'm not interested in persons.
Okay, I understand.
You
So, what
know,
would your favorite era be then?
I love Achaemenid period a lot. I like, of course, like all Iranians, Parthian period a lot. I like Sasanian period a lot.
Mm.
Uh, I like Safavid period a
Mm.
lot. Basically, Afsharid period as well a lot.
Yeah.
uh, Zand period, and also early Qajar period. Yes, I
Okay.
also like that. Yeah.
Interesting. And what is your favorite king's sword that you've held?
But I love really Safavid period shamshirs or kings
Mm.
from Safavid period. They're top
Okay,
quality, top quality,
that makes sense. Yeah. And
top quality.
when you had Nadia Shah's sword, was it crucible steel or was it just a?
All of them, all of them,
Okay.
all
Interesting.
swords of kings, without exception, are magnificent crucible steel.
Mm.
Not
Okay.
even one of them is not. All those swords in Military Museum of Tehran, Bandar Anzali, Shiraz, Pars Museum, and Naderi Museum in Mashhad, all
Mm.
of them 100% crucible steel. Not only swords, daggers, all of them.
Mm.
Axes, not a single one which is not crucible steel.
Makes sense, I suppose. And you say you're writing a book about military strategy. What's your sort of I don't know, hypothesis or idea that you're focusing on in it, if that
Oh
makes
God, I
sense.
don't know. We are in the open, but okay, I can tell you, no problem.
Mm.
I teach intercultural management and also some other areas when they invite the academic institutions I will teach. The thing is the following: culture, for me, forget not military culture, because we have a military culture. Every culture gives you a lens to look at the world,
Yeah.
okay? Which is clear. Many researchers say cultural lens, cultural lens. So many people say culture, like if you look at Trump and Ars Hofstede and these people, they say through this lens, through these glasses, you look at the world, and when you look at the world, it gives you to make understanding. So to culture is to us like water to fish. Trump and Ars says that. I'm not that extreme because I tell you, we always think we are free thinkers. Everyone thinks like that, but we are completely, not completely, but we are, if you don't have intellectual self-defense, you are a product of the culture you grew up with. How is
Mm.
this culture given to you? This culture is given to you by your parents. This culture is given to you by people you have contact with. This culture is given to you in the kindergarten, then school, primary school, high school. I think you have like A levels, right? In
Yeah.
Britain, high school, A levels of high school, then university, and so. Of course, there are differing opinions, but we need to think about that. You are not the culture. For example, you are not British culture, because I don't believe in that. You can be counterculture. You
Mm.
can go against the culture, but then the problem starts. Culture, the way I teach to my students is like that. Any culture, national culture, has tactics of inclusion and tactics of exclusion. You agree with us?
Mm.
Great guy. You disagree with us? We punish you. The level of punishment changes from one culture to the other. Some cultures, the level of punishment is hard. Some cultures, you don't realize it. You lose your job,
Mm.
you lose your privileges.
It's very subtle,
very
sort of.
subtle. But
Yeah.
actually, at the end of the day, it's the same thing. So the culture is like that. So tactics, I call it tactics of inclusion and exclusion. And then why? Because they want you to behave in a certain way. The same is with corporate culture.
Mm.
Now, when we analyze cultures, when I teach, you need to analyze national cultures and corporate cultures. What does it mean? You need to go and say, okay, I have a national culture. National culture is like that, and the corporate culture is exactly like that. So both of them are interaction. For example, if you work for investment banking in London, they have a different corporate culture. If you work for a law firm, another corporate culture. If you work for University of Cambridge, there is another corporate culture,
Yeah.
right? But then at the same time, they have a national culture, which is a British culture. So what does that mean? It means for us that these cultures uh, determine the way you should behave. You can go against it, but going against the system is difficult. So once we know that national culture is like that. For example, if national culture in each system, why do we need culture? Because culture needs to give me norm. If
Mm.
and it's normal. Because I cannot go now at this time, turn up the volume and just start to listen to music as loud as I want. I mean, my neighbors are
Yeah.
going crazy. What the hell is wrong with you? I cannot do that.
Yeah.
There are norms, and these norms should be there. And there are also other norms, the way I should behave,
Yeah.
right? But then at the same time, some of these norms can be dangerous. We always say the majority and this, but maybe the majority is wrong. That's why,
Mm.
sometimes we have whistleblowing systems, sometimes we have other systems, right?
Yeah.
So if you know that corporate culture limits you, if you know that national culture limits you, the same is with military culture.
That's very interesting.
Do they do
Yeah.
how do they do this and you can go through the military history books, you can go
Mm.
to, but you need to go to manuscripts, not to what some modern interpretations are.
Of
You
course.
know that I archery manuals, I've done that, crucible steel production, and I've been doing lots of research on these military manuals and what they advise, how they do. And then you
Mm.
see, okay, then you compare it to national culture, you compare it to this culture, try to find cultural patterns in that.
Mm.
And military culture, people say, what, military culture? Yeah, because we have, again, tactics of inclusion, of exclusion. If the military culture of my country determines that you secure land, then you move. Do you think they are going to allow you as a general to go and conquer the center as fast as you can?
No, that makes sense. Very interesting.
They don't let you do that.
Mm.
Tactics of inclusion and exclusion. And another thing which I am, as you know that, I speak different languages, I studied in
Yeah.
different countries. That's why I can teach them, because I always say to understand the mechanics, you need to be exposed to different cultures. You need to know, you need to be, you're not one of them. And once you feel that, and then the better you learn the language, one day you become one of them, because I think you grew up there. And then you
Mm.
can melt in that society. In
Mm.
Germany, in all countries I mentioned, I studied in their language, in their country. I didn't study English in Spain or in Germany. I studied in
Yeah.
Germany in German, in Spain in Spanish. So one thing which is important, it gives you, then you understand these tactics of inclusion and exclusion. Because the thing is, this special, and for me, this culture is extremely important. And say, okay, how do they analyze that? How do they try to depict that? How do they do things like that? So that's very
Mm.
interesting for me.
That is very interesting. And do you have any advice on learning languages at all, since you've learned so many in so many different places?
I mean, you need to, as soon as possible, not to translate. You need to, as soon as possible, to learn words in
Mm.
their own environment. For example, I always say, you want to learn a language perfectly? Okay, what is this? You say a pen. Okay,
Yeah.
describe a pen in the language you're learning.
Mm.
I
I see.
understand.
Yeah.
You need to describe every word in the language you learn, because in contrast to what many people think, and it's proven, actually, it's not done by me, a famous linguist did that, and his name is Stephen Pinker, Professor Pinker, because, and Professor Pinker is, that I studied different subjects, right?
Yeah.
And my PhD is in English, is English linguistics, right? But I studied also have masters in business administration, and now I publish so much in academic journals on weapon and metallurgy. People even don't know. I publish in engineering and metallurgy so much, right?
Mm.
But the thing is the following: I'm a trained English PhD, English linguist and PhD, with a special emphasis on United States America. But one thing which is important is this: Stephen Pinker, our colleague, an American linguist, proved it that in his famous book Language Instinct, that we do not think in our mother tongue. I mean, people say, I think, if you're an English speaker, I think in English. You don't. I think in that language, you know. And this language we have for our mind is called mentalese. So what does mentalese mean? Mentalese is the language of the mind. What you learn, you already have a language when you're born, but no one understands. Babies have a language. They make this, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's the
Mm.
language. They don't know how to formulate it, so you understand that.
Mm.
That's why they cry. So, for example, I give you one example. Inuit language has different words for snow, which they
Mm.
don't exist in English. But if they explain to you, this is a bluish snow, which is going to melt when the sun is rising, you understand, you start to differentiate
Mm.
snow. But you don't need English to understand that. You don't need German to understand that. You don't need Persian to understand that. You understand all these things.
Yeah.
You have a language of the mind. You don't have the function to give it to you one to one.
Mm. That makes sense.
You
So
understand?
if you learn words for different
You
objects,
need, in order to do that, if the moment you start to translate from one language to the other, when you want to speak, you can. When I speak Spanish, I speak Spanish. I don't translate in any language.
okay.
When I speak Persian, I think in Spanish. Persian speaks Persian. English the same. German the same.
Mm.
And how do you reach it? You need to describe words. And the second thing is the following: for every word, for every word, you have a memory.
Yeah.
For every word. For example, look, water,
Yeah.
coffee. You know, if they put you on hypnosis or whatever, you might remember, oh, you were 2 years old and you saw your dad was drinking something hot.
Mm.
And then you ask, what is this? And he said, my son, coffee. That's your first encounter. You already knew this damned drink, which is hot and
Mm.
smells strange. Now you transfer coffee. Now
Yeah.
you need to create for every word a memory. That's the
So
challenge.
yeah. So for every word of the new language, you need to make a
Like
memory
that.
for. Mm.
Question is time. If I get you, Alex, and I say, Alex, you are going to be sent to learn Persian, for example, to Iran, and you're going to have an absolute immersion. You need to promise that for 1 year, you do not read anything in English. You do not call back home. No one. You do not go into internet in English.
Mm.
No matter what happens, you do only Persian. Do you know what happens to you after 1 year? You
I
come
imagine
back
I'd
and
learn Persian.
you speak Persian like a
Mm.
Iranian. The
Mm.
problem is the following, and I can prove it to you. The problem is the following. A, people have family, right?
Yeah.
But I grew up with English and with Persian, so we had both languages. We went to school with both. But later on, I learned Spanish and learned German, right? But the
Yeah.
thing is, the more languages you learn, the easier it is for your brain.
Mm.
The
Really.
first one is the most difficult. Later on, if you learn the second, the third, the fourth, it's not that difficult because your brain is wired.
Mm.
Your brain is wired. But this immersion, total immersion, is important thing.
Yeah.
And then the brain, another thing about the brain is this. The brain doesn't want to have a second language. Our brain wants to have one language. This is the easiest. It's the same. When we start with Razmafzar, both hands, ambidextrous.
Yeah.
Many students have problems, don't want to do that. My left hand, as I can do with the right.
Yeah.
Everything. I can even write with the left hand, right? Both hands, I mean.
Yeah.
But the thing is the following. If you come and leave your brain, you don't do that. It's like sport. Do you really think your brain wants you to go outside in the cold and train? No.
No.
Do you think your brain, when you see a big piece of chocolate cake, tells you don't eat chocolate cake, you put on weight? No, you just eat and put lots of energy. The brain always wants to have as much energy to store and as much comfortable as it is.
Yeah.
Comfort zone. Exactly. Comfort zone. The brain always pushes you into comfort zone. Survival modus. Don't spend much energy, make it comfortable. So the key to success is not only, in my opinion, in languages, also if you want to have exceptional performance in your life.
I wish it were possible to fully immerse myself for a while, but obviously it's very hard.
No, it
Because,
is hard, of course, because we have all family obligations.
Yeah.
Friendships, family obligations. But this is the immersion. Immersion is not, Alex, immersion is not you're sent to a country to learn the foreign, there to learn. But few people do that. Why? Homesick, you get homesick, you want to talk to people. But if you give in and give up, there is no immersion.
I wish there were more sort of places I could do Persian in Britain.
But in Europe, you don't have such a thing.
I know, it's a shame. But that is helpful. I might try and change my laptop's language to Persian. It might help, because that would be somewhat of an immersion.
What is the level of your Persian?
I'm intermediate. I'm in the second year, but it's not like fully intensive, so I think intermediate is proper.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, before we finish, I have some questions. Why did you come to Razmafzar?
Well, I've always loved, swords and sword fighting. I've never been able to do it before because I'm from Lincolnshire, which is very, very rural. So there's nowhere to go there to sort of do fencing or whatnot.
Where is Lincolnshire? I've never heard of this place.
It's in the East Midlands.
Oh, okay, I know where it is now. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's extremely rural. It's all fields. And so I never had the opportunity before. I always used to, when I was a kid, I'd play in my garden with wooden swords. And that, and that would be my main sort of thing. But coming to London for university, it occurred to me, hold on, I can actually do fencing. I can do, HEMA or whatever. And I thought, hey, I wonder if there's an Iranian sort of sword fighting, like Iranian martial arts. And I looked it up and I managed to find Razmafzar, and I was like, oh my God, this is what I was thinking of. This is perfect. Because it combines my two, well, not my only loves, but two of my great interests. And
very nice, very nice. Yeah. I'm really happy about that, because also very good. I'm really happy that you are learning Persian, because it helps you a lot with techniques.
Yeah, when you teach me, you should say what the techniques are called in Persian, and I might be able to try and translate some of them.
No, I will then also use more and more Persian with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't know that. No, because you know that we have many actually Iranian Americans who train with us, right? And of course they're American citizens, they speak perfect English, but they also speak Persian. So I use these Persian terms and they have no problems with that. They're bilingual. But I didn't know you speak Persian. Otherwise I would have used more for you Persian as well. I didn't know that, right? Because with them I'll use only original Persian terms, right? But because they're bilingual, they have no problems with that. They will speak English. I teach in English to them, but they know all these, I use all these terms in Persian. So I will do the same with you, right?
Very good. Thank you.
Right.
Did you have other questions?
No, just like that. This is this one. You have been training shamshir and saber, correct?
Yes.
Do you like archery as well?
I do, but I don't have the space for it, unfortunately.
No.
But I hope in future to be able to do archery, certainly.
Yes.
I think it'd be very interesting.
You can do tubra, right? As Usman shows it, very close range, and shoot at the close range. But it shouldn't be a heavy bow, because it's they use tubra as well, like in 1 meter, 2 meters away from you. It's about the techniques.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe next year I could try it. My one issue is that I'd be afraid of breaking anything because this is only a rented apartment.
No,
And
no, of course. All of
yeah,
a sudden, the arrow goes.
yeah, and I've left enough. I have a few marks because of my sword already. So,
No, of course, of course. Would you like to say anything else to our viewers now?
I don't think so. I think it's been very interesting. Thank you very much for
Thank you very
your
much.
thoughts.
So,
And yeah,
thank you. I wish you a nice day.
yes, I
Thank
wish
you.
you
Bye
too. Bye.
bye.